The night my son-in-law knocked my plate onto the floor, he was standing in front of 12 senior partners and raising a glass to celebrate a deal he thought would make him untouchable. Red wine had spilled across the tablecloth. My dinner was on the hardwood floor near his shoes, and when I bent slightly to pick up my napkin, he laughed and said, "If you want dinner, lick it off the floor." Nobody laughed with him. Not at first. They looked at me. A 70-year-old man in a dark wool coat, standing in the private dining room of a downtown Seattle restaurant, surrounded by people my son-in-law had spent years trying to impress. I did not raise my voice. I did not threaten him. I adjusted my coat, looked directly at him and said 3 words. "Call your board." The color left his face so quickly that even his partners noticed. My name is Samuel Grady. I am 70 years old, and for most of my life I have been the kind of man people overlook until they need something built, repaired, funded, or saved. I started as an electrical engineer in Tacoma. Later, I built a small industrial supply company with 2 employees, 1 truck, and a warehouse that leaked every winter. By the time I retired, I had sold the company, invested carefully, and spent most of my time trying to be a good father to my daughter, Claire. Claire was my only child. Her mother, my wife Judith, died 9 years ago after a long illness. Claire was 27 then, and I remember holding her in the hospital hallway while she cried into my shoulder. "Dad," she kept saying, "what are we going to do now?" I told her what fathers say when they have no idea how to answer. "We will figure it out." For a while we did. Then Claire met Nolan Pierce. Nolan was polished, ambitious, good with names and handshakes. He worked in commercial development and had the kind of confidence that filled a room before he even sat down. At first I liked him. He brought Claire flowers. He asked me questions about business. He even came by on Sundays to help with things around the house. But over time, the questions changed. He stopped asking about my life. He started asking about my investments. He asked whether I still own shares in my old company. He asked whether I had ever considered becoming a silent partner in larger projects. And every time I gave him the same answer: "I am retired." Nolan always smiled when I said it, but he never looked satisfied. 2 years after he married Claire, Nolan started a development company with 3 partners. They built luxury apartment complexes near the waterfront. Their brochures had glossy photographs, rooftop pools, and words like vision and legacy. Nolan wanted me to invest. I told him no. Not because I did not trust Claire, because I did not trust the way Nolan spoke about money. To him, people were not people. They were leverage. A month before that dinner, I got a call from an old friend named Douglas Reeve. Douglas had spent 30 years in commercial banking. He was now on the credit committee for a regional investment group. "Sam," he said, "your son-in-law's company is trying to refinance a major project." I told him I already knew. Nolan had mentioned it at a family dinner. "He needs a capital guarantee," Douglas continued. "A very large one." My stomach tightened. And he is telling people he has access to family assets." I went quiet. Douglas lowered his voice. "Your name has been mentioned." That was the moment I stopped seeing Nolan's questions as curiosity. He had been preparing. The dinner happened 1 week later. Nolan invited me, Claire, his partners, and several senior executives to a private celebration at a restaurant near Pike Place Market. He said it was for a major milestone. Claire was excited. She wore a blue dress Judith would have loved. I wanted to tell her what Douglas had said, but I needed proof first, so I went. The room was expensive in the way some places work very hard to prove. Dark wood, brass lamps, floor-to-ceiling windows looking over the water. Nolan sat at the center of the table. He had already ordered champagne. Throughout dinner, he kept making little comments about me. "Sam still thinks cash is king. Sam's generation does not understand modern growth. Sam retired before people learned how to build real wealth." The guests gave polite smiles. Claire looked uncomfortable. I stayed quiet. Then Nolan stood to make a toast. He talked about ambition, about taking risks, about not letting old-fashioned fear hold the next generation back. As he turned toward me, his elbow struck the edge of my plate. It fell. The food hit the floor. For 1 second, nobody moved. Nolan looked down at the mess, then at me, and he smiled. "If you want dinner," he said, "lick it off the floor." The room froze. Claire whispered, "Nolan," but he had already committed to it. He wanted the room to see him as powerful. He wanted me to feel small. I stood up, slowly. I adjusted my coat. Then I said, "Call your board." Nolan's smile disappeared. He stared at me. "What?" "Call your board," I repeated. "Tonight." One of his partners, a man named Aaron Bell, looked from Nolan to me. "Is there a problem?" he asked. I looked at Nolan. "That depends on whether he told all of you where his financing guarantee was coming from." Nolan's face turned pale. Claire stood up. "Dad, what is going on?" I looked at her gently. "Not here." Then I walked out. I did not wait for dessert. I did not wait for an apology. Outside, the air was cold and wet. Seattle rain had started falling in that quiet way it does, almost like the city is thinking before it speaks. I got into my car and called Douglas. "It is time," I said. The next morning, Nolan's board received a legal notice. The investment group had suspended the refinancing process. The reason was simple. Nolan had submitted documents suggesting he had access to a family-backed financial guarantee. He did not. He had used my name, my old company records, and a copy of an outdated trust summary he found in a folder at Claire's house. He had never asked me. He had never received permission, and the guarantee he promised investors did not exist. That was bad enough, but Douglas had also found something else. Nolan's company had been using advanced tenant deposits to cover operating costs on another failing project. Not illegal on its own, depending on how it was structured, but hidden, and the investors did not know. By noon, 3 board members had resigned. By 2 hours, Nolan's office had locked its internal financial system. By 4:30, his partners were calling him one after another. At 6:10 that evening, Claire came to my house. She was crying before I opened the door. "Is it true?" she asked. I stepped aside. She sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Judith used to help her study for math tests. I showed her the documents, the loan request, the false guarantee, the messages between Nolan and a consultant discussing how to position the family assets. Claire read every page. Her hands shook. "He told me it was only a temporary business issue," she whispered. "I know. He said you were going to help." I was never asked. That was when she started crying harder. Not because of the money, because she finally understood that the man she married had been using her father's name as a tool. Then Nolan called. Claire stared at the phone. It rang again, and again. Finally she answered. I could hear his voice through the speaker. "Claire, your father is destroying everything." Claire looked at me. Then she said something I will never forget. "No, Nolan, he is stopping you from destroying everyone else." She hung up. "Now I want to ask you something. Do you think Nolan's partners deserve to know the truth before they invested more money? Or should I have stayed quiet because he was family? Comment truth first if you think I did the right thing. Comment family first if you think I should have handled it privately." Nolan's company did not survive the investigation. His partners discovered more debts than they knew about. The waterfront project was sold to another developer. The board removed him within a month. He lost the title, the office, the dinner invitations, and the people who only stayed close when they believed he could make them richer. But the worst thing he lost was Claire. She moved into a small apartment near her hospital job and filed for divorce 6 months later. I never told her what to do. She made that decision herself, and I respected her for it. One Sunday afternoon, she came to my house with a box of Judith's old photographs. We sat on the living room floor and looked through them. There was one of Claire at age 5, sitting on my shoulders at the county fair. One of Judith laughing in the kitchen. One of the 3 of us on the beach, before life became complicated. Claire held that picture for a long time. "I am sorry, Dad," she said. I looked at her. For what? For not seeing him clearly? I took her hand. "Trusting someone is not a mistake," I said. "What they do with that trust is their responsibility." The truth is, I did not enjoy watching Nolan fall. I enjoyed watching my daughter wake up. That was enough. Because some people think power is embarrassing an older man in front of a room full of important people. But real power is knowing when to stay calm, knowing what you own, knowing what was signed in your name, and knowing that sometimes 3 quiet words are enough to make the wrong person realize They have been standing on borrowed ground all along,